more people are coming, but I want to get into our intro, get everybody settled, so we have enough time to hear from Molly tonight. All right. Hello and welcome. I'm trying to actually see. Step out of that light. There you go. It's great to see so many art workers here tonight, painting people, and friendly faces. My name is Amanda Grrrl. I am an assistant professor in the painting and drawing area of the Department of Art at UNM. Maybe. You guys hear me? Yeah. All right. Today it's my honor to present our 2024 Hammersley visiting artist, Molly Zuckerman-Hartung. And their artist talk. We can plan on about 45 to 50 minutes from Molly, with about 10 to 15 minutes of time for conversation and Q&A at the end. Many of you are familiar with Frederick Hammersley's legacy and the visiting artist programs in his name here in New Mexico. Beginning in 2017, the Department of Art launched our program, which invites prominent contemporary painters to come live and work in Albuquerque. Funding for this program is provided by the Frederick Hammersley Visiting Artist Program Fund at the Albuquerque Community Foundation. The mission of the program is to honor the legacy of Frederick Hammersley and expand awareness of his life and work through the establishment of links to exceptional painters working today. Through this program, visiting artists are provided with accommodations at the Hammersley House, an honorarium, a studio in proximity to our graduate students, and the visiting artists are invited to create work, conduct studio visits, hold workshops, deliver this lecture, a public lecture, and host an open studio event. That we invite you to. It's next month, Thursday, April 18th, 3 to 6 p.m. at our Annex Studios on the central UNM campus. Feel free to come up to me after if you have questions. Our website has more information. A lot of people here probably know all about it, so please join us. And so we want to extend a big thank you to the Albuquerque Community Foundation's Kaya Griffiths and the Hammersley Visiting Artist Program Fund Advisory Board for their support and partnership with this ambitious program. Thank you also to the Department of Art team, Jacqueline Lay, Meg Elcock, Danette Peterson, and our graduate assistant, Christopher Schultz, for all your help on the ground. All right. Christopher has a longtime fan in the audience because they have their grad show up right now, plug for that at the Summers Gallery. We're also grateful to be gathering here today in partnership with the Albuquerque Museum. Good things happen when we make bridges and pathways between and beyond these big houses we do our work in. Thank you to Elizabeth Becker, Curator of Education, and the museum team. William Gasaway, Assistant Curator of Art, will now share some details of upcoming programming here at the museum, and then I'll briefly introduce our main event. We'll welcome William up here.
I've done nothing to deserve your applause, but I appreciate the opportunity to be here. The only reason I'm here is to share that we also have a visiting artist program supported by the Hammersley Foundation. And our upcoming artist is going to be installing the week of April 1st and debuting April 5th here at the museum. He is Chick Thomas, also known by his street art moniker Jetsonorama. Do any of you familiar with Chick Thomas's work already? We're extremely proud to have him with us. For those of you who don't know, he is a physician, an artist, an activist who began working as a doctor on the amalgamation in 1987. He recently retired, but for years and continuing now, he has been a practicing artist who's known for large-scale wheat-pasted photo murals that stitch together the faces and emotions and worlds of people that he knows and loves and wants to celebrate by putting their faces larger than life on the sides of buildings that otherwise go unnoticed, but now with his images break up that drive down the highway that all of you have done, I'm sure, out to Arizona and back. It's just a beautiful way to highlight the community and its resiliency, especially during the COVID pandemic. So we are celebrating that body of work by asking him to install works in a similar vein here in our lobby. Again, April 5th it'll open, and we made two great, huge photos out in the lobby that unfortunately kind of wheat paste that's really hard to clean up in some cases, but we're going to print them on vinyl. There also is going to be little gems of trinitite hanging from strings up above to highlight the theme of this particular presentation, which revolves around nuclear communities here in New Mexico. So I hope you all can join, and I just really want to thank the Frederick Hammersley Fund for the Arts at the Yale Grrrl Community Foundation for supporting this program and into the future. We are really grateful to be able to do this. Chips will be up for a full year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now Molly. Molly Zuckerman-Hartung is a painter and a writer. She works at a feverish pace, integrating histories of painting and poetics, and at the same time, chewing them up, challenging them. She grew up in Olympia, Washington, cut her teeth in the Midwest at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, co-founding the renowned artist-run space Julius Caesar, and now lives on the East Coast in Norfolk, Connecticut. In 2021, the Blaffer Art Museum in Houston opened a major survey exhibition of her work titled Comic Relief, accompanied by a monograph. Her work was featured in the 2014 Whitney Biennial, and she has shown at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago, the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, Kadel Willborn, Kunstgallery, and more. She has been a critic in painting and printmaking at the Yale School of Art, teaches part-time at SAIC, and as a critic at various MFA programs in the US. Zuckerman-Hartung is represented by Corbett versus Dempsey in Chicago. Please join me in welcoming Molly Zuckerman-Hartung.
Okay, hi. Thanks for that warm introduction, Amanda. I really want to thank Amanda and Welly and Rachel and John Abbott and Scott Anderson and Christopher for all of the support and friendship that they're offering while I'm here. I'm really, really happy to be here. Here in Albuquerque, and I'm still not quite happy to be on this stage yet. I'm not here yet. But I am going to be happy about that as soon as I get my feet under me. Don't worry about me. I always start nervous. We all do. But I just was sitting down there suddenly having this memory of the thing I really wanted to start with talking to you about, which I completely forgot to put any images in, and I have about 50 images of that, which is probably fine because there's already 250 images in this talk, so we won't get through them all. But I did really want to start with this kind of project that I did a few years ago, researching the thing that everybody here is very, very familiar with, the development of the atomic bomb in this neighborhood. And so I did a lot of research, went to as many sites that are known as I could. The reason I'm bemoaning the lack of images is, one, because there's a couple of images I really wanted to show you, but also because I have no memory of words, names, nouns, etc., so I'm going to give you only vagaries at the moment. What I discovered was, in all of my research, I went to the Atomic Museum in Las Vegas and did a printmaking project with a former student in Las Vegas. What I discovered was, if you've been to Vegas, you already know, a large amount of culture that was generated out of the atomic bomb, like hairstyles and cocktails, this kind of thing, right? And there was a huge culture in Las Vegas during the tests that were going on of the atomic bomb throughout the 50s and 60s, surrounding those tests. People would have cocktails and sit on the roofs of casinos and things and watch. There were parades. There was like a Miss Atomic Bomb contest. You know, it was really a fun part of the 1950s and 60s. I found one image that felt different to me during my research, of a white woman wearing a black leotard and dancing with a mushroom cloud behind her. And it actually didn't have a stem, so it was really just the cloud. And I started researching this image, and it turns out there was a journalist, a photojournalist in Las Vegas, who hired this dancer who was normally, she'd been trained as a ballet dancer, but she was normally, dancing in one of the casinos. But she had some modern dance training. And so they went up into the hills at dawn when the tests were happening, and she danced in front of the barn. And I've made many, many drawings of the various poses. There's about 6 poses that they've published as still images. This was a critique. This was not a celebration. That's what was interesting to me. It interested me that somebody would do something so playful in front of something so horrendous. And I guess I find that really important, and I was really drawn to it because I feel like that's the job that I've taken on as an artist. With that, I guess I'd like to move into the subject of light and lightness. And John Abbott was actually in my studio the other day, and as he was sort of leaving, the subject of lightness came up. And I remembered that has been my subject because I forget basically everything all the time. I was like, light. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm teaching at Yale Norfolk this summer. I teach a seminar there. I did it last summer. I'll do it again this summer. And our theme this summer is making light. And it's been really helping me think about light and about dialectics. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today, is the way that dialectics pervades all of my work. And the dancer in front of the bomb would be a really great example of a dialectical image, right? There's this incredible lightness in front of this incredible heaviness. Maybe the fact that I've got 260 or 55 images for you today that I won't be able to show you is one aspect of the heaviness. I can never figure out what's important because it feels like, everything is important. And I'm not going to show you anything of the politics of our world or the environmental devastation or any of the other things that we're all very, very aware of. But I do hope you understand that they're just there all the time. There's one more thing I wanted to say about light and lightness. And one of the things that it brings is knowing that things could always be otherwise. There's a kind of flexibility, a lightness on your feet, an openness to change, acknowledgement of contingency. And then there's holding a lifetime of multiple possibilities, and all the regret and scheming and excess actually becomes very heavy. So this is, the first image is a couple of images of possible covers for the monograph that Amanda mentioned. These were considered in the process of making the cover for the monograph from the Blaffer a couple of years ago. They did not become the cover. I won't show you the cover. You can look it up if you wish. So this poem, this is by Jennifer Moxley from this book called The Line. True faith does not need the state to enforce it. It makes neither hope nor a shroud. You will walk out of the visible and learn to accept the darkness. You will find the line. It extends backwards eternally into the past and forward into the future. The utterance cup, the gentle metric, old words, new mind, lost time, and loves. You sensed it all along. But gaining the knowledge was hopelessly muddled by the inherent drive to author new life. Now cut the spittle line spun into reason and enter the grave alone. In other words, write. Find time in words. Replace yourself, cell by letter. Let being be the alphabetic equation. Immortality stay the name. This is a little sculpture I made here about 2 weeks ago. Pine needles from the trees outside the studios. There's the whole sculpture, and it hangs on that little thing. How something hangs, how it's affixed, how it's attached is always significant for me. Some things are still temporary, they're still just thumbtacks, but they're always moving towards trying to figure out how they'll attach, what their relationship will be to the wall and to the floor. So these are the drawings of the leaper that you may have seen on the poster for the show. They come from Merce Cunningham photographs. I do a lot of looking at photography of modern dance to think about gesture and to think about bodies. A little skyscraper I made last week here. Been thinking a lot about skyscrapers again as a dialectical image. Also, the poets that I've been reading, lately wrote a lot of poetry right after 9/11, and their poetry often references glass and concrete and the sort of materials of the scrapers. But I'm also thinking about like pine needles as skyscrapers. Yeah, so some other projects. I'm just going to kind of fly through the things I've been working on right here. I'm collecting lines, and I'll be doing a workshop next month where we collect lines together and play with line. So these are just on my walks to the studio around the neighborhood. I'm just collecting line, all kinds, making them into shapes which hold a bit of wall. I make a lot of things that I call guitars. I like to put my paintings in front of windows. This is the painting from the poster before it got the figure. Both of these are from my studio back in Connecticut, just recent shots of activities. I made a lot of these layered paintings, and I'm only going to show you one, but literally like layer after layer of textile, different kinds of textiles. So there's a lot of hidden paintings and drawings and things in these, and then I would make this cut and then kind of hold open the layers with safety pins. And after about 8 months of working this way, I sort of left it behind, which is really typical for me. I don't really know where it's going. I know that layering is deeply important to me, but maybe it wasn't meant to be this way. The safety pins don't feel right, even though I love their kind of punk feeling. I do love that it's sort of an overt reference to the vagina and to the eye, but somehow I couldn't, as I was talking about it to people and showing them, I couldn't get them to sort of see the kind of movement of a signifier, the kind of changing possibilities of a signifier. People would get really stuck on that's what it is, which I guess is one of the things I have problems with about signs and symbols and representations and all these things, that they fix things. And I like to keep things moving somehow. These paintings came out of that shape, making it the negative a positive, and also thinking about guitars. Here's a little figure right there. Tiny little figure. I took it out of a New Yorker magazine. It was a figure jumping into a pile of money. So I removed all the money. So this is the only thing you will see, and this is the dancer I spoke of. I made a lot of work surrounding her, many, many drawings, many prints. This is Walter Benjamin's Angel of History, which I redrew. And the text there is about Walter Benjamin's Angel of History, which is, it's Paul Klee's painting that Walter Benjamin claimed and made meaning out of, and talked about the movement of this angel. And I'm not going to be able to explain it. I invite you to look it up. If you Google Walter Benjamin, Paul Klee, Angel of History, there's hundreds and hundreds of descriptions. It's a very meaningful image to me, but I know I'll say it wrong, so there's no use trying. This is all just what's happening in the studio right now. This is not right now, back in Connecticut. This one's about 5 feet tall. It's glitter and raw pigment and glue. This one's about 6 feet. It's pretty much close to my standard size, which is the double bed size, the dimensions of a double bed. It's this nylon that that other large painting is made on. It's coat liner nylon, and Sigmar Polka used to use this material, and I've always loved his translucent paintings, and so I sort of hunted down all the different possible materials that could be that material, and this is what I've ended up with. The seams are sewn, but they just hide, there's a bit of material in the back, so it's actually one piece of material that there are seams, and then the seams operate as conductors. So the dye, when I put it on, runs through the seams. You'll see seams, and then there's glitter and acrylic paint on this also, but you'll see seams throughout my work. There's always a kind of play with what the seam is doing, whether it's connecting or whether it's hiding a bit of material. The various operations of the seam are pretty important to me. They're coming out of edges in painting. Just a little guy. So these are folds, not the same as a seam, but so the canvas is folded and ironed, and then paint is drizzled on it, but you can still see the breaks. So again, I've been thinking for a very long time now about long lines and short lines in painting. And to be able to think about that in poetry is kind of a new venture for me, but I've just been studying William Carlos Williams, who apparently broke Walt Whitman's line. And so then Walt Whitman's long poetry lines became William Carlos Williams' short lines. And so if a poet in the US makes a poem with short lines, they're getting it from Williams, which is a weird thing to think about, but it's how I think about painting, which is part of why it's so exciting to me. I think about painting as being a language that we're passing on and we're fucking with. Whether we want to argue with it, or whether we want to take it, or whether we want to play with it, or change it, or do whatever, we're still picking up a language that already exists and doing something else with it. And that's what I find so exciting about painting. And so I love to give my citations. I love to say almost everything is borrowed, stolen, whatever. I forgot to set my timer and I'm already running really low, so let's just look for a minute. The Norfolk Studio, Connecticut. Just one day. These triangles are coming all off of the long beams in the process of constructing a studio on our property. They're coming off the beams, so I used a heck of a lot of triangles as a kind of they're like the little playthings for the big fancy studio, which still seems rather intimidating to me. Another guitar. Okay, so the dialectical image. Simone White is the next poet that I wanted to talk about. She is an East Coast poet. Also, I forgot to mention Jennifer Moxley is a white poet from San Diego who now lives in Maine and teaches at the University of Maine. Simone White is a black poet who teaches sometimes at Bard. That's where I met her. I didn't know how much I loved her poetry yet, so we didn't talk about her poetry, and now I regret it because I'm obsessed. So I find this poem exciting for many reasons. One is the dialectical image of it. Hour in which I consider hydrangea, a salt or sand plant, varietal. The question of varietals, the diet of every mother I know. 5 pounds feels like 20, I have lost. I have lost, yes, the sense of my own possible beauty, grown external. I externalize beauty. Beauty occurs on the surface of plants. The sun darkens the skin of my child. He is so small, he is beautiful. I can see, it is obvious. And everything about him is beautiful. Because he is small, the bite of some insect, its venom, makes his hand swell. He appears to feel nothing. He smashes his skull against the floor. He screams. I hold him in my lap on the kitchen floor in front of an open freezer, pressing a pack of frozen clay against his forehead. He likes the cold. I see. It is so obvious. Hydrangea. When I move, when I walk, pushing my child's stroller, it is both walking and pushing or hauling, sometimes also lifting. It is having another body, an adjunct body, composed of errand and weight and tenderness and no small amount of power. I imagine I can feel this small amount of weight, this 5 pounds like 20, interfering with the twitch of every muscle in my body. As an object, a mother is confusing. A middle-aged mother with little spare flesh. I feel every inch of major muscle pulling against gravity and against the weight of my child, now sleeping. This is the hour for thinking hydrangea. Let no man look at me. I stop to brush the drowsy child's little eye, his face. He barely considers his mother. I am all around him. Why should he consider what is all around him? Perhaps what is missing is a subtle power of differentiation. I am in, therefore, a time of mass apprehensions. You can find this poem on the Poetry Foundation, I think that's the name of the website. There's a recording of her reading it, which is really beautiful. Probably should have played that beyond my tech skills. There's also a very short explanation that she gives about it. She read the poem on a walk with her son in his stroller. And I guess I just wanted to say that the tradition of flower poems is long, right? And to think about the kind of potential sentimentality that one can do with a flower poem, the potential interiority of domesticity that one can compose with a flower poem. She did something very, very different. This is something I made in graduate school back in 2004, post-bac actually at the Art Institute. I bought a copy of The Poetics of Space. I bought a chair at the Goodwill, and I put the book on the chair on the street and left it. And I still think about that as a move. This is something else I made in graduate school, which is still absolutely important to me. I worked in used bookstores and bars, but the bookstores are more relevant to this, for about a decade, maybe 12 years. So the shape of the book, the folds of the book, the materiality of the book has always been really important to me. So this is just canvas stretched around a 2x2 square. Thinking of kind of important monochromes, square monochromes. I'm not going to explain this painting, but I had a studio visit with Estelle, and I mentioned something that I had made long, long ago, and she said, "Oh, will you show that in the talk?" And so I couldn't find that painting, but I thought I'd show a few incredibly old works, which I usually don't do anymore because it's been a long time since this work. Yeah, so if you want to know about now, I'll tell you later. But I was using a roller in this, like a brayer roller, and I'm still using those tools. This is something I just made 2 weeks ago here. I did want to say that there's a lot of material surface damage in my work, and I think that that's another super important thing. It's a displacement. And the painting that I'd spoken to Estelle about was about a painting I made of Iggy Pop's chest, which was scarred and fucked up looking, and still is. And so I was thinking about that damage, and it's one of the motivators for a very early painting that I made, was thinking about the representation of damage on the body, and then I think over time I've displaced it. So the damage here is just from the bandsaw. Plywood. This is back from that time as well, and I called it the heavy painting. It's a painting I worked. Amanda mentioned. We made a pact long ago that we would always say all the names. So Dana DiGiulio, Colby Shaft, Hans Peter Sundquist, and Diego Leclerc. There we are. founders. It became many other people's galleries over the years. It's been passed on, which I feel very proud of. This is the space I ran in Olympia. It was called No Exit. I found this rooming house sign in Seattle. They were razing a neighborhood, like destroying all the houses in the University District in Seattle, and the No Exit rooming house had been there since the 70s or late 60s. And so I stole the sign off the porch because I knew it was going to be no longer, which is a questionable move looking back, but I wanted to keep the feeling alive of the No Exit rooming house. So I named my, it was a venue. I had a lot of bands perform there, most famously The Gossip, but lots of bands, and we also did lots of art shows. This is a zine I wrote in Olympia back in the 90s, which got me kicked off of a tour. I was supposed to be the roadie for Le Tigre and Tracy and the Plastics, and Kathleen Hanna didn't like my zine. It was dialectically critical of her. Another thing I regret. Self-portrait from maybe one of the first paintings I ever made, maybe like number 2. Sheila, did you say that? Yes, thank you. Shout out. Strong influence on all young. I made a lot of paintings of Michael Jackson back then. I was pretty obsessed with a number of things about Michael Jackson, as many always have been. This is a painting I made about Michael Jackson maybe 9 years ago. I taught a class at the University of Northwestern University in Chicago called Reading Moby Dick as Artists. I took a class on Moby Dick in grad school and then taught this class, and we just read Moby Dick all over the campus next to the meat trucks. We just talked about the text in all these different ways. It was a really fascinating class, and we had a dedicated classroom, so this is how the class ended up. Okay, so yeah, line. I kept eliminating slides, so there's slides that precede this that would make it less of a non sequitur, but yeah, thinking about line really came from Moxley and this book called The Line. So here's one more Moxley poem called Mortal Aurora. Morning after morning, while you lay sweatily wedged between weary physicality and tedious selfhood, the punctilious programs of the already dead tromp heavily through your mind. Then the easeful thought occurs to you. This is only a matter of time. Once a delicious diversion from reason, hunger states its case. Oh yes, go feed the little ones. That will snuff out the metaphysical questions. It is my belief that this tedium all started when the elusive present you so longed to possess at last became all that was left. If it's not already clear, one of the things that I'm thinking about with line is time and the timeline and how we make a thread, how we hold a thread. And to think about time in painting is not an easy thing to do. So it's the thing I'm always working on one level or another. And I don't have time to read this one, but I recommend you find it also on that poetry website. Or in the line. So this is a very early little object I made. Heisman's Against Nature and called The Wild/White Thing by Jock London. I thought that was a funny kind of stack. This is Herbert Marcuse's One-Dimensional Man made two-dimensional, three-dimensional, I guess. I always forget what the dimensions are. The fourth is time, right? Is that okay? Dumb. I poked some holes in the back of this painting at some point and spray painted it front and back. This is still, we're like in the mid-2000s. I don't, like 2008 or something, I need to speed up. Speeding up, just going faster. Cutting into the canvas a lot, breaking it apart in every way. We're moving into that's plexiglass laid back in a cut painting. Weaving, that's gravel, spray paint, enamel, latex paint. Little tiny nails in the Leonardo da Vinci. I guess I thought the nails were like the little eyes of the ermine. You know, what can a painting be is always one of my questions. How can it move out of painting and still be painting? What kind of room can it have? What kind of gestures can it make? I think I like the way that one sort of casually leaned. So these paintings are recent. This is like from last year. This one took about 3 years actually, so those 3 years, 21 to 24, 2004, 24, 21 to 24. This one's old again. Let's say 2010. Those are staples for teeth, and it's got cut holes for eyes. Mosaic. This is that old technique that I love, when you put a lot of crayons, very thick, and then you put black tempera over it and you scrape back in. One of my favorites. This is all oil paint, but I was sort of made a bunch of paintings thinking about how to replicate that in more permanent materials. But now I'm actually using tempera paint. That green one was just black or green tempera, because tempera is just the best. It's so, not oil, not egg tempera or anything special, like the cheap powder. It's just got such a great chalky quality. This one's called Scalps in French. The paintbrush is being... Don't explain your joke. This one's called Stevie Nicks. That's the back of a jacket, a green leather, turquoise leather jacket that I cut all the seams out of. I always think of this one as like a really sad party. Oh. Carved off that side and carefully put it back on. Does that one? This one happened when a can of orange latex paint fell on it. So that's spray painted silver now, but that whole giant body thing was orange. This is a move I made a lot way back before I ever got a sewing machine. So I cut the central rectangle out of this painting and then flipped it and then glued canvas to the back to put it back in. Michelle Grabner in a review called it a Photoshop move, but it was like pre my knowledge of Photoshop, which is actually today. Today I have pre-Photoshop knowledge. But I called them queer paintings. I was thinking about introducing difference into sameness, or understanding difference inside of ostensible sameness. I was trying to think about how those kinds of rearrangings occur. So there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to say much about this. These two modernist chairs, lucite chairs, are handcuffed together, and that's a globe. I painted it black, cut a hole in it, put a mirror on it. There's a long painting there that I think we'll see a couple of others that are similar. I thought of them as push me pull yous. This was exhibited at the Walker Art Center in an exhibition called Painter Painter. I made a lot of jokes about fisting when I made this, which I'm not going to make, but I'll allude to them. So yeah, a lot of shredded canvases during this time, which let's say this is 2009 to 12 or something. That's what I mean by it. So it's like, I think of it as a push me pull you, that character from Dr. Dolittle that's got two heads that pulls in both directions. So this was like probably me trying to think about ambivalence, dialectics, difference, relations. It's always about relations, like with people. I made this one while I was teaching a class at Oxbow one summer. And then we made a big parade out of it, and Colleen Smith was co-teaching with me, and she made a film, and we walked it through the snow. It was winter, I didn't remember. It was a winter class. It was called Indoors, and we watched a lot of horror films and then analyzed them because we had Colleen Smith there to analyze them with us. This is this little exhibition in Kadel Willborn back in 2010 or so. Some of these cut up objects. That's in that comic relief monograph. It's not the, so it's a photograph of the photograph of a painting. I made this big giant project at some point of photographing my entire studio, like David Hockney, you know, you mini photographs and then you piece them all together. Back then I was always talking about the floor incessantly. The floor is still hugely important to me, but maybe I don't say all the things anymore. But this is one of the ways I've made paintings. I stretch a painting into the canvas and then take the stretchers off, but there's a kind of compressed area and then a kind of expansive area. It's a way of thinking about different kinds of gestures that one makes in the studio when one is making head activities and then when one is making bodily activities. And I was trying to really kind of let those things have different languages in the studio, different forms, take different forms. The green in this painting was just a gift. It was like an old can of latex that just came out multicolored like that. This painting was, as you can see, at one time hinged to another painting and then removed, and it's now destroyed. There's so many paintings that are now destroyed. Here's another now destroyed. I just found it while looking and thought, I always thought this was a pretty funny joke. I guess I thought, never mind, I'm not gonna try. I thought I wanted a painting to brag. To like both suggest that there was a relationship with the viewer, that like, hey, you and me. And also to be like, I don't think I've ever tried to do that again, but that's what I was thinking. That big white part is, it's brown linen, and then it's bleached a lot, and then that white part is actually poured on the back.
What does it say?
It says, we have same taste, but I have great legs. I also thought it was funny, like a painting doesn't have legs. You laughed, it's funny. Too bad it's destroyed. This is a painting of a poem, right? Like I put the poem by my friend Shannon Stratton. So she wrote this poem and then I made her a painting. And it's kind of like a calendar, like you can turn up the pages and leave it on different pages. Oh my God, I'm not doing well with time. Okay.
You're good.
Okay, this show.
15, 20 minutes?
15, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. This is the catalog for a show at Corbett versus Dempsey. Dates are relevant. Let's say 2013. Called Violet Fogg's Azure Snot, which is one translation of a line from a poem by Rimbaud, the French poet. And then in choosing a translation, because there are many translations of his poems, I thought, oh, like anything can be translated, like my name could be translated. And so I had the gallery, we all sat around coming up with translations of my name, or transliterations or something. So that was a lot of fun. And then I wanted them to print it in this way that they did, which makes it look like it's going on and on and on, like kind of infinite, so that it wouldn't look like we had sat around and come up with these, but maybe an algorithm made it. An algorithm didn't make it. Every one of them was come up with by one of the staff at Corbett versus Dempsey, sitting around in the office. Maybe it is also maybe based around all the things that have already happened to one's name, right? To make it one's name. That's that same folded painting years later, and it was in that Violet Fogg's Azure Snot show, as was this one. And so this one and that one are made sort of similarly. You can see the paint is drizzled on the folds. In this one, I opened the painting back up. It's linen, and it's silver paint, and so the drizzles become short lines, so a long line becomes a short line. And this is many experiments surrounding this, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with this little move, I guess, that this is sort of a pile of possibles. I'm a certain kind of painter because I want to show you the pile of possibles rather than the kind of painter who just wants to show you this, which is a real kind of painter, and I really respect those, but I'm just not that kind of painter. Gotta know who you are. The only way I know that I'm stuck being me is all these years trying to be somebody else. This is another painting from that show. This one's the biggest, it's on drop cloth, and it's about 7 feet tall. And you can see it's a stencil. We had to do a lot of research to figure out whether it was legal to show that flag. Because it's cut. It's not cut, actually, but it is sewn. It is damaged and upside down. This is one of the first times I made something that I was trying to think about sequence, and it's funny, these days I'm finally like, oh, fuck sequence. Like, you can tell in my talk, I'm like, when did that happen? That's not the line. But I still like this one. It's called Using a Nickel as an Excuse to Draw the Moon, and Using the Moon as an Excuse to Draw a Nickel. This is an exhibition in Nebraska at a space called Fiendish Plots, run by Nancy Friedemann Sanchez and Charlie Friedman. They're totally different, Friedman and Friedman, but they're a married couple, but they get their names from different places. Very cool. I called it Timeshare, and I think, even though I feel short on time, I'm going to read you this, because I just found this was the press release, and one thing I thought about a lot during this, putting together this talk, was press releases. This is what I wrote for the press release. I've been dreaming of calendars. My friend E broke up with his girlfriend the same week that David Bowie died. He texted me, I can't believe he's gone, and didn't mention the woman. Between 1997 and 2002, I sustained an unrequited longing for E. We had sex a few times, and his desultory apathy stung. He fell in love with my friend C, and they slept together on Kay's couch in the afternoons after nights of drugs. Kay died in February of 2013. He was all alone in the city, but still doing heroin. He died of an overdose. My mother wrote to me in 2010 that she always had dreams of her ship. Sometimes it came in. I wrote to G in April of 2012 about my l'esprit d'escalier with him, the spirit of the staircase. Denise Diderot, who was born in 1713 and died in 1784, wrote, a sensitive man such as myself, overwhelmed by the argument leveled against him, becomes confused and can only think clearly again when he reaches the bottom of the stairs. He was 71 years old when he died, a sensitive man attending parties. Now I live up 3 flights of stairs. On the first floor is a bar called Lone Wolf, where I dance sometimes by myself. The first time I fell into a stupor of love, I was 19 years old, and his name was Lone Wolf. He lived with me in my apartment on 21st Street for 6 weeks in 1994. When he left, he moved to another city and read Olive Proust, which he said reminded him of punk. Lone Wolf died before September 11th, 2001, or maybe after. His coffin was powder blue. In 1989, Nirvana released their first album titled Bleach. I've been painting with bleach because I like to watch the colors disappear. Watching the bleach reminds me of working in the black and white darkroom in college, back in 1995. Bleach is a corrosive agent, like rust or iron oxide, which is the red color in bricks and blood and also on Mars. David Bowie's 5th studio album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, was released in 1972, 3 years before I was born. Sun Ra and his orchestra were exploding interstellar travel back in the 1950s when my mom was a kid. Last summer in M's basement, I reread a faded and yellowed copy of The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. He used the series of Martian landings by Earth people as an analogy for the violence and stupidity of colonization on Earth. The painters of the Stone Age placed their imprints on cave walls with iron oxide. The mark of presence is also the mark of absence. Dee taught me this between 2005 and today. I need help with the heavy shit. So these are the paintings in that show. Calendars. Blouse and King. Dana and I decided to call the show Queen. Dana was my first very serious girlfriend. But by the time we did this show together, we'd been broken up for about 5 years. These are her flower paintings on the left and right. Speaking of somebody who uses flowers to dance in front of the bomb. Here's a few of my paintings from that show. A lot of these paintings are made from the back, so I set up sawhorses and then put the painting on the sawhorses upside down and then pour and do things and then crawl underneath it with a flashlight, see what it looks like. It's a drawing from that time. Funny how it could be a drawing from this time. This is a show at Corbett versus Dempsey, 2017, called Jennifer Jason Lee. That was the art form ad. This is kind of standard double bed size. There's a lot of collage on it. The paper, the colored pieces that are all kind of, those are all construction paper, so it's completely not archival. I've been thinking about this painting lately, Power Poor. It's called something like something history for the new queer subject or something. I can't remember the exact title, but I've been thinking about like what level. It's weird. It just do these things and I'm like, you were really being ironic. So it's built out of Cezanne's Bathers. I was looking intensely at Cezanne's Bathers and thinking about T.J. Clark's writing about them, but also about looking at them and how crazy, queer, interesting their bodies are. They share body parts. They are gender amorphous. They're very exciting bodies. And so I was looking at them and drawing them over and over again, thinking about them. And I just, this one's one of the bathers on the far left there that's kind of all to the left of the bathers in the painting by the time I finished with it. But I keep thinking, I don't know, that bather, the idea that I would put the words power poor next to that bather just is kind of still cracking me up. It's kind of like eternally sunbathing in a kind of like hieroglyphic pose. The opposite of heroism, I think. So these are holes, and then the painting was folded on itself, and then I painted through the holes, and folded it back over, made the rest of it, and those are pieces sewn in and things. So a tiny painting from that show. Lots of materials, a lot of jar lids and paper pulp and paint and grout, tile grout, a lot of tile grout. This is called Melanie Klein's Part Object. The part object is the breast, if that's not clear from the painting. I think it's like also an old joke, thinking about the kind of, the way in which painting has been thought of as phallic, with all the kind of classic images of Pollock peeing, or, like Warhol looking at Pollock's paintings and saying that it was pee, and then he pees, and these kinds of references. So I wanted a fluid gesture that was coming from a not penis. But Linda Benglis says that the paintbrush is dildonic, which I think is true. It's a phallus, which is not a penis. It's just a usable protrusion. Important to keep that in mind. This is one of those long gone paintings. I had this thing for years. I was making Barnett Newman zip, the central kind of spine, also thinking of it as a spine, thinking of it as something to square up to on the painting. If you want to talk about zips with me, I'm always interested. I'm always interested in grids. I moved to Chicago from Olympia, Washington, which is in the Pacific Northwest, which is part of, it's like a very like hilly, watery, like non-gridded terrain. And I moved to Chicago in 2004, and was just like the fucking grid, like modernism, like nobody told me. And despite being over 100 years late, I was still very excited. And I've never gotten over it. Never gotten over the way that you can tell somebody the coordinates and then they can find their way there in Chicago. Like, never gotten over the flatness. This is a painting that I just left at Lauren Luloff's studio in Brooklyn, and then she was like, I want that. And I was like, you take it and you store it. This is in my storage building in Shelton, Connecticut. If you want to be an artist, you have to figure out storage. I used to talk all the time about storage because my stepfather ran a mini storage. So that's what I grew up doing, was like sweeping out storage units and renting mailboxes and renting out storage units. And I think about storage all the time. It was a very sad, depressing place. He was a real dick. He, kicked people out all the time. I mean, homeless people were always wanting to sleep in them, and my mom and I were always like, let them sleep a couple nights. Like, what's the harm? Anyway, we won't go there. These are all these just kind of funny, like homeless, speaking of homeless, I can't believe I just said that. Paintings without like destinations. This one's been destroyed, taken off its stretchers. This one still sits, but it's like super saggy baggy. It's on drop cloth and it doesn't really have any tension. This is from a Du Buffet. This figure, this woman eating off the fork. But I just put the last line, so this is a text that says that here we constantly lose our ideas. This is a painting that never became. That's been painted over. This one exists. That's red velvet on the bottom, or purple velvet. The rest of it is silver paint and dye and acrylic paint and black enamel. Also, the composition is stolen. I can't remember the name of the artist, or I would say it right away. When I think of it, I'll tell you. Early modernism. It's a painting from the Yale Art Gallery. Painting in a drop cloth. I'm thinking a lot about drawing, I guess, right now. Drawing in figures and gestures, as always. I really want to read you this, but I'm not going to. But this is the press release from Learning Artist at Rachel Leffner Gallery, and I'm just going to show you. I just was looking at this show, and I've not really shared it in a talk before in such detail, and then suddenly I was looking at the images today, and I was like, that was 2017, it's 2024, it's been 7 years, I finally like this show. I finally don't feel totally ashamed of it. This is the long hallway as you come in, there you see. It was all about cutting these curves, which I explained in the press release if you're interested in curve cutting. But I was learning the bandsaw. Involves a shower. It's funny. I think what I want to say about it right now is that there's always this kind of impulse in my work to try to make what seems merely formal something that is actually deeply infused with meaning, which I think is always the case with the formal, but most formalists don't want to share all the things that go into it. Formalists, I think, choose to be formalists because they're very private. I am interested in formalism for what you can play with about how meaning gets made. It's a deep honor to be here in Frederick Hammersley's house instead. His formalism is super moving to me on all sorts of levels. I have lots of thoughts about it. So these are the install shots. This is like a chandelier or something with like a very low child's toy. So really, I mean, what I just now feel really great about is how I just used the whole space. You really could feel all the different kinds of space happening in the room, and these giant linen calendars. The bulges and the paintings, the ones that are actually stretched. These are peonies that I smashed. So just like space, the dimensions of it. Like I would smash peonies a lot with the printing press at Yale Norfolk, because they're just these thousands of peonies. Do you have peonies here? No. Okay. They're like little, like tight little fists when they first come out. They're just this like incredible tight ball of petals. And I would put them through the printing press and make prints of them. And then that's, it's all dried up. So always thinking about like how something bulges or how it gets flattened, right? The violence of flatness, I think, was what I was trying to convey. I hope that's clear. No. Okay. So here's some bulges. All right, I'm just gonna keep moving through images and say I'm open to some questions, love some questions if you have any. Thank you. Destruction of something that was part of a community that had an audience that people could understand and relate to, that the relationship between the band and the audience was reciprocal, but I don't know, I mean, I think that they were beautiful. He was a very gentle, beautiful, crazy, awesome person. They were deeply influenced by all kinds of things like the Beatles. I don't know, we could talk a lot.
Is there a lot of writing that goes into your process?
Totally, lots and lots and lots, lots. Not much of it do I feel like it's good. There's like notebooks and notebooks full of just notes that never become a thing. I'm finally getting, I've been reading poetry, I realized, for like 10 years, but I only very recently, I'm studying poetry. Because I think I just kept feeling like, I don't really know what it is, but I don't write poetry very often. I mean, I feel like I've written like 20 in my whole life, But I'm trying to write a book about painting. We'll see. It's like 50 pages long right now, and I don't know if I like any of it, but yeah, writing is important.
How do you come to the conclusion that one of your paintings is done?
That's the classic important question. Can I give you a classic answer? When it's good. Otherwise it gets destroyed. And then later I look back and say, but that was good. So clearly my judgment is no good. I don't know. So I think it used to be, there's been a change, and I'll explain that, which I think is useful. I used to pile things on. Here's like a bad painting. It's important to me to show some really bad things, just so when I say good, I know the difference or something. But also because it's super important to make a lot of bad work, I believe, even if you don't share it. Awesome, good. And there's no shame in it, and it's great, and everybody does it. But what else did I want to say about that? I used to just pile and pile and pile until something got good, like just add something more, and you can always take something away, cut it up, da-da-da. And I think lately I'm trying to be a lot more light in my touch, in my relationship to the work, and I'm having a much harder time. So then I keep thinking, do you only have damage as your method for getting somewhere? Ooh. Uh-huh. Yeah, monotype. Plexiglass with a roller and little pieces of cardboard.
Have you noticed any sort of distillations to your processes, like, for instance, the destruction and the flattening? Have you noticed any sort of experiences that you go through, because your concepts are so interesting to distill into something, not simple, but exact, maybe?
So you're wondering about like other distillations, or like what's the process of arriving at a distillation? Is that
Well,
what
for
mean?
you and arriving at your concepts that you want to explore.
I'm not, what I want to say is I went to undergrad at the Evergreen State College for French literature and philosophy. We studied like French colonial practices, Haiti, Algeria, France, and all of the ideas surrounding those moments and histories, all in French. So the lectures were all in French. And so I didn't go to art school for undergrad, is what I'm trying to say. I went for that, whatever that was. So I have this way of, that seems like fundamental and deeply ingrained, where it's like get yourself into a whole lot of confusion and then try to find your way out. I've definitely called that deconstruction at times. I always say, one of my many jokes, like I read Derrida before I read Plato. Like Derrida wrote about Plato, right? But like, I just have always sort of like started with the contemporary and then been like, but where is that from? And what is that? Or started with now and then been like, whoa, like how do I work my way towards understanding or having any distance from something? Like I start with intimacy and okay, now I need to figure out what that is. So the distillation you're talking about is the product of all of that, like being inside of a shroud and then being like, find language, and so it feels really like painting for me is that thing, because I did think I was going to be a writer or be like a philosopher or a translator or something, and then I was like, you're not capable of thinking that way at all. Like, does that kind of answer what you're saying?
Yes.
What role does color play?
I never talk about color, and obviously it's huge, right?
Well, it's expansive. Like there's not a zone that you necessarily put in directly.
Except for that pink is always coming back. But you're right, it definitely, like right now in the studio, I bought the worst, weirdest, like off, like not, I don't know, like some fake, like a Pyrrole red or something, you know what I mean? Like I bought all the weirdest colors, cold yellows, and the paintings I'm making, I'm like, well, what, that color is so bad. Like, and I was like, I can't make it look good, but I guess I enjoy that. I guess I enjoy the struggle with color. I used to have like visions of color, like I'd be like on an airplane and I'd be like, this shade of pink has to happen. And, but now I feel like it's more, and then I also really am trying to embrace like empty space and lightness, like a white ground, like a not, like I'm buying sheets that are just white sheets and then I'm just starting to work on them. And there's so much color in painting these days, I guess. I feel a little like, and everything has kind of the color like the screen, like everything is very illuminated from behind. I went through a really long phase of that too, like as the internet was getting bigger and bigger, it's like all my paintings, they went from like silvers and blacks and kind of like punk and aggressive to being like bright color, and I really don't like that, but I tend to work kind of intuitively, and so it took me a while to be like, don't want that. Yeah.
All right. Oh, this is a great one. So your use of line and folding feels like a sci-fi explanation for black holes.
Awesome. That's exactly right.
And so sometimes a thing that seems to be like one long line, you unfold time and space and suddenly it's just a whole bunch of really short lines. But also that seems to have a sense that like the uninterruptibility of a line in terms of like these things were set in motion years ago, especially once you delve into the research. And so I'm wondering about how when you're partaking in synthesizing pop cultures, deep history, and knowing that you're this one little line that's actually part of a much larger line when eventually someone compresses the universe and collapses it in a way. How do you think about your work in terms of futurity and like your relationship with eventually being appropriated or being deconstructed yourself?
It's already happening in spades. There's so much that, at least I know a lot of people who are like, hey Molly, here's another picture of your influence. And mostly people make them look better than I did. So as far as that goes, I accept it wholeheartedly. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery or something. I long ago stopped trying to control the flow of images or something. Mostly, so my relationship to that is basically pedagogical. I'm like, if we're gonna do something, let's have ideas be attached to it, right? Like, let's not let images peel off from material. I want the ideas to stay in it really badly. That's what's at stake for me with painting. I had another answer to that, which is thank you for that incredible question. That's beautiful about black holes. I love it. I used to talk about time all the time. I don't know if I understand a black hole, but I used to talk about time in relation to these things. I talked about time today, I know, but I was trying to talk about folding time and theories, and I was like, I'm not good at physics. I don't understand any of this, but I feel that we time travel in our studios. I know, right? So there's something about that, and there's something about being able to kind of gather knowledge and then work through that knowledge and have it live through you, and yeah.
Thank you.
I feel like, I was wondering, in your work, you use a lot of like lines, but also these like empty spaces a lot, or these sort of like open spaces. And I like the word you used earlier when you talked about ambivalence, and I feel like that's a word I've been thinking about. There's like a relationship in your work between like the way you use a line and its tension versus like a space and its sort of lack of tension, I guess, if that's like a meaningful, more formal sort of thing in your work.
I mean, so much, right? But I think like trying to figure out how to charge ostensibly empty, nothing is empty, right? But ostensibly empty space or something is like all I'm thinking about right now. I'm so much better at filling than I am at emptying. I think that emptying is so much about grief, and I'm not great at grieving, cry easily. But I'm invested in grief, and I believe in grief, and I believe we all should be grieving all the fucking time. Because also it's a communal activity. I don't think it's something you can really do alone. And so I think figuring out how to let space be or let emptiness in has to do with that, has to do with letting things go, loss. And as you can see with my too many images, I have a really hard time letting things go. But that's a beautiful question.
That might be a good one to end on. Yeah.